Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man Season 1, Episode 4. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, let's start off with Lonnie's side of things. So, Lonnie... it's kind of doing, kind of like what Peter does, the whole living a double life thing, and you kind of have to lie to your loved ones type of thing, where he's like trying to tell Pearl, like, oh, everything's okay. Like, oh, here's a rose from my mom's garden. Thanks for driving me around. And it's like, oh, if you want me to, I could take you to it. I said, no, it's all good. The situation was like my brother got in some trouble. It's fine now. We're all good. But he's like, oh, I got stuff to do. It's like because Donovan calls him up. It's like, yo, you got to come in to work, And so Donovan trying to show a force, like, ends up making an example of, because Lonnie was running his mouth because the guy, he was there trying to do his homework, and he was like, not like we're doing anything. And he's like, oh, you must want something to do. All right, go to this very specific place and pick up us food. And I love the one crony being like, hey, make sure you get extra, it has for extra hot sauce. I got a sauce drawer. It's like, which, I guess like everyone has one, sauce drawer or bag or whatever the case may be, receptacle to just put, sauce packets and stuff in. But he ends up rolling up on Scorpion territory, which is a warring gang there. Was it the 110th? Is that Donovan's gang? Which immediately with the Scorpion stuff, I'm like, as in like literal Scorpion? And we got introduced to Carmilla. I was like, oh, is she like a gender bent Scorpion? But it's like, no, they drop Mac Gargan's name, which I could be missing, but I do strongly believe that is Scorpion's real name. So it's interesting. So he's not Scorpion. I mean, he could have the suit, but it could just be a thing of we're introduced to him as a gang member. So it might not be a situation of like he's gotten the suit, but he might already have the moniker of Scorpion, which is interesting too, considering like they do set up Scorpion in MCU. We've just never paid that off because he was introduced in Homecoming. I believe it's Michael Mando plays him. But once again, he's just a gangster. He's not like suited up Scorpion. So, because I don't know if it's changed over the years. I do believe, I think this is me remembering this from the 90s animated series, but he has beef with J. Jonah Jameson. I want to say one, like the PlayStation Spider-Man game also covered. I think he was like a boss fight in that as well. But like he's typically tied to J. Jonah Jameson because he hates J. Jonah, because J. Jonah's the reason why he's stuck in the suit and became Scorpion in the first place. I'm probably going to have a very different storyline in this. I'm curious, will we even get J. Jonah in this at some point in time? In what capacity? Will he be closer to more traditional J. Jonah Jameson, or will he be in kind of the more like Alex Jones-esque version that we've gotten both in the MCU and even in like the Spider-Man games for the PS4 Spider-Man, and then like the PS5 Spider-Man 2. So yeah, I'm curious about that. It is super effed up that Donovan sent him into the lion's den without letting him know, like, oh, you're not just stepping in. It isn't just like Carmilla was the only one there. Like, everyone in that. I wonder if the guy behind the register, because he was like, yeah, take care. Like, he knew what was about to happen. So I don't know. He might not be with the Scorpions, but he knows this is Scorpion's territory. And it's just kind of like, if you live in that neighborhood, you just know it is what it is. So you don't want no trouble, but you kind of felt bad for the kid. I mean, luckily he was able to run away, but it's like, yo, like he was about to get jumped. That was about to be scared because they pretended like they're going to let him go. And that one guy followed them. But it's super effed up on Donovan's part because he wanted to prove a point to let him know, like, hey, those people, like, if it wasn't for us, if it wasn't for me and my gang, you wouldn't be able to live comfortably in your home. But for Lonnie, he's thinking like, no, I'll just move my family out. And he's like, yeah, move them out and go where? Because moving, it's going to be very, very expensive. And obviously they don't have a lot of money. Extra motivation for him to get out of his neighborhood and probably really push to try and get him and his family out, especially with everything with Andre, like getting mixed up with this crowd too. So it's like, you got to get your brother and your mom and dad away from all of this. And, that's sad, self-sacrifice of it all. But he's trying to make a point of, oh, now because Carmilla knows what you look like, Mac knows what you look like too, and they don't forget faces. So they know you're with us. They can easily track down people because Mac is always he used to find people. So I don't know what that like. I don't know if that's just a profession like what his situation was. Once again, I'm not that familiar with just Scorpion outside of just being Scorpion and his beef with Jay Jonah. Other than that, I don't really know much about Matt Gargans as a character. So I don't know if that's something specific to him in his continuity or that's just something tied to the character in general that he's very good at finding people. I don't know what his previous gig was before he started his whole gang stuff. I mean, maybe he's always been a part, or, you know, a good chunk of his life he's been a part of this gang world, and he's always just really been good at tracking down people. Maybe he just has that natural reputation. But Donovan's forcing Lonnie's hand by being like, oh, I've kind of basically introduced you. Now you kind of have no choice. It's either roll with us or go on at it alone. But going at it alone is pretty scary. These are some scary people. But with us, you roll with us, hey, we got your back. So Lonnie's, you know, it's a lose-lose situation. So it's like, I have no choice but to capitulate even more. And Donovan's putting you in that position. Even though it's like, it is super effed up. It's like throwing you into the lion's den, not letting you know he's throwing you deep into the lion's den. But it was just to kind of prove a point to see what you're capable of, but also to put you in a lose-lose situation where you have no choice but to, like I said, capitulate. And, you know, and it's like, oh, like, I will tell you what's what, not use yours as a pawn when I learned that your loyalty and stuff like that. So Lonnie going forward is going to have to do more and more to prove himself to Donovan. But once again, it's that thing of you go down this slippery slope. But if you're put in this position where it's like, I'm screwed either way. It is super effed up doing what Donovan did, but now it's like, it's too late now. I have to take advantage of the situation I'm in. I'm here. I will show up. Whatever he needs me to do, like little things, fine. But now it's like I'm gonna have to do more and more to prove my loyalty so that he can protect my family. So you just do the best that you can with the circumstances being what they are. So on the flip side of the episode, we have Pete trying to present in front of Whitman, and Whitman proceeding to rip him a whole new asshole in front of everybody. It's just like, and everyone's just kind of like, oh boy. It's sad the only person that sticks up for him is Dr. Connors. I mean, that character always typically is good, especially with their relationship with Peter. Typically, it's like they are the only one that kind of sees Pete for, I mean, obviously Osborn in this continuity, but you get what I'm saying. They're usually one of the few people that always kind of rides for Pete. So he's not presenting like he's very nervous, and Whitman's not doing him any favors, just being kind of an asshole. But it's also like Pete, despite superpowers and everything, Spider-Man, you could be confident. Peter Parker, not so much. That's the beautiful duality, you know. But they're also like, oh yeah, does anyone else find it suspicious that Peter keeps getting called by Osborn? And so Pete ends up running into Harry. And, you know, so I think a friendship is, well, that's going to be interesting too, considering how the episode ends on that story arc, but we'll get to it when we get to it. So I'll talk about Harry more then. But I love the whole, like, oh, like, got this privacy thing. And it's like, oh, I wish I could have that back at home when, you know, when I bring over girls. And he's like, if I, you know, when I do that, because I don't. It's like, Peter, this is for Spider-Man talk, not none of that. It's like, oh, okay. And so Osborn is making new suits for him, and he wants to test him out. I am curious, are all those suits in some shape or form from the comics, or are they stuff originally for this? I know the final suit is something from the comics. I'll get to that in a second. But there's also little elements of the other suits. Like, he has an antagonist. What's its name? Like, is it the Beetle or Firefly? I can never remember. I think he's a boss. I think he's one of the bosses you fight in the Ultimate Spider-Man game. It's like this, like, comic-y, like, cel-shaded, really dope game for, like, I know the PS2 was one of the games, because that's why I played it on, but I think it probably came out like maybe the Xbox and stuff like that. But either way, I want to say it might be the Beetle, but I always think like Firefly, but I could be mistaken. But yeah, like, one of the suits reminded me of that, but another one had like the gliding ability, which I was like, okay, some Spidey suits have that. I mean, obviously that was something they introduced in Spider-Man 2. the PS5 Spider-Man, where it's like the whole gliding suit thing, which I always like that aesthetic. It doesn't always pop up in some versions of the suits, but like the little webbing that Peter has like under like the armpit area, I always like that aesthetically. It just depends on what continuity, but not all his suits, not all his like base level suits have that. It's just kind of an interesting thing. But yeah, like the whole gliding thing. It's like, oh, so I don't know if it's like these are original suits for the show, but they're sprinkling in certain aspects of suits that Peter has had all across like Spidey comics, or was it just a thing of no, those are straight up suits he's had in the comics. So I love the one with the cape. It very much gives like the what is it, Superior Spider-Man? No, like Superior Spider-Man's the one where like Doc Ock's inside of his head, right? There is a version of Peter where he does have like Doctor Strange's cape. We've gotten like references, winks and nods to that, where it's like a little bit of that in I believe Infinity War, and obviously the Marvel Zombies episode. We got like a little bit of that. I want to say, isn't that one of his suits like in one of the Spidey suits you see in the background of like across the into the Spider-Verse? I could be misremembering. I think there was one that had a Doctor Strange cape. Like I said, it might be Superior Spider-Man, but I could have sworn that's the one where like Doc Ock is inside Peter's body. I could be misremembering. Once again, I'm not the comic book person, but this is just Marvel comic stuff, Spider-Man lore and knowledge I've picked up just randomly here and there, just from other people and just my own research and stuff like that. So, but yeah, capes aren't that great, which I love that like Peter's like, yeah, it kind of makes me give a little Thor vibes. He kind of got hung up. So that kind of sucked. He was trying to save this lady's purse from getting snatched, interrupted it, but then she has to basically tape like him like bundled up. I wonder, do those guys who pick up the pipe and the board, did they actually beat Peter up like a piñata? I think they actually did, because I think you hear him saying like, well, I'm not a piñata, or they say like beat him up like a piñata. The second suit is like a hornet suit, and he can't really fly, and that's a whole issue. The third one was like he scared a little girl when he was trying to return her balloon, which is that like a Spider-Man staple, like the whole balloon thing? Because I'm like, it makes me think of like, isn't it like, I think it's the Spider-Man 2 video game, like the one that's based around the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 2. God, I know that's the damn thing about video games. The one that's based around the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 2 movie, like there's video games where like you have to like get kids back their red balloon thing. It's kind of like the pizza minigame where you're like delivering pizza. It's kind of like that. Like I think that's just a staple in Spider-Man stories. But he scares the crap out of the kid. And it's like, yeah, that kid looked at me and screamed at Norman, being like, "Damn, I was afraid of that." It's like, wait, you knew that was a possibility. You still, you still had Pete go out in there. He's like, "Oh, we should put like a smiley face on him." He's like, "No, that's gonna make that creepier." So I love that whole trial and error of these suits. Some larger lore, because I've heard people talk about this, so I knew it was coming. I just didn't know it was going to be this episode. The whole talk of the Sokovia Accords. So the events of Civil War have happened, because that's roughly like, so that's also interesting too, because of that. It tells you like where in the time frame, like what year this is. Not less the events are like being moved up to present day. So like, for example, this cartoon's coming out in 2025. Let's say like the events of this like took like, it's like, oh, this could be technically 2024 where these events are happening. But in the MCU timeline, this all happens. Civil War happens in 2016. So I'm curious, so is that saying that this series is set in 2016? Or are we just setting all those events from the mainline MCU and we're just moving them up further in the future of the timeline? So it is like 2024 or whatever when that's happening. But because they do talk about like other things, like everything from the MCU up until this point is canon, whether it's like a Hulk's rampaging, or the events of the first Avengers, or Avengers Age of Ultron. But now it's like, oh, the Avengers have split. It's a big thing. Obviously the biggest difference is Peter's not involved in that whole ordeal. So it makes you wonder why didn't, like, and I wonder will they even go into it? Probably won't. Maybe it's just Peter never uploaded video of himself. No, because like I think the video that like got Tony's attention was, I don't know if that was like street camera footage or someone else's footage. I don't remember like that footage that got Tony's attention. But I'm curious like why in this continuity Tony never reached out to him. I'm just curious. I wonder, is it just because Norman got to him first and made sure no one else did? Or did he kind of keep all the information? Like, he kept Spider-Man such a local thing that videos never went viral and never were on Tony's radar to begin with. I don't know. Well, like I said, minute stuff like that, which has pretty large ripple effects, sure, but like I don't know if they'll ever get into the nitty gritty of details like that of like we'll ever find out. It's not important, really. You know, that's always the thing. Like, once again, like, you going left instead of right could have domino effects you just never know. And it's not the biggest decision why that happened. It's just know that the thing happened. You chose a different path. Things played out differently, and that's all there is to it. There's no reason to really get too heady about it, but it's just something I was just kind of curious about. But it's interesting because Norman wants to create the next generation of heroes because he's like, right, there's superheroes, but there could be stronger heroes. He's like, I'm pushing you, Peter, so hard because I know what you're capable of, and this world is going to need even more heroes. You could be kind of leading the next charge of the next generations of heroes. I mean, look at the Avengers. They've kind of messed up. They've kind of having the Accords that exist to kind of make them have to kind of pay for their past mistakes, and I don't want you to have to go through that. I want you to be greater, and you know, when this world's going to need heroes with the Avengers being split up the way they are right now, you know. So Norman's really pushing that, and I kept stressing this last episode too. Like, I don't know if Norman's had his evil turn yet. Once again, not necessarily, oh, he's Green Goblin evil, but he could just be Norman Osborn doing evil, and it just becomes even more evil upon becoming the Green Goblin. But it's like, it seems like for now he does seem altruistic. Like, he does seem like he has the best of intentions. I mean, you never know in this continuity. It could be a thing of he never does become Goblin. Yeah, he might do some shady stuff, and he might have ulterior motives for pulling, like, you know, Peter along, just further manipulating him type of thing, sure. But it could just also be genuine and sincere. We'll ultimately have to wait to see. So either way, it's a lot of pressure to put on Peter. But finally, Norman kind of realizes, like, right, I'm putting a lot on you, but maybe we need to go back to basics. Because the whole point was to try and expand, you know, Peter's, like, and he's like, oh, you aiming for your demographic. Peter's like, well, I have a demographic. It's like, yeah, you do. So trying to aim for all these people, trying to put him in the spotlight in different ways, trying all these different things. Like, oh, like, why do you have to be a Spider-Man? He's like, well, I was bit by a spider. So, well, you can kind of put yourself in a niche like that, which I love, like, getting into the nitty gritty of that. But he ultimately gives Peter a new suit. This being, once again, not the comic book person, just stuff you hear here and there and stuff you pick up over the time. But people refer to it as the future Foundation suit. Basically, it's a suit that he gets traditionally from the Fantastic Four. He has another suit. I want to say it's in the PS4 Spider-Man game. I forgot what's it like. Was it like the Amazing or Fantastic Bagman or something like that? Basically, it's Peter in a Fantastic Four suit, but instead of having a Spider-Man mask, it's a paper bag over his head. It's a very specific suit from the comics. I want to say it's a unlockable suit in the PS4 Spider-Man game, if I remember correctly. But yeah, that's only like Fantastic Four related suit I was aware of. Like, I think I've seen the Future Foundation suit. I just don't know the story behind like how he got it and why he has it. But I was also surprised by, like, I don't know if that's just a lighting thing or what, but like, it looks bluish on the side. I guess in my head, like, from my recollection of seeing the suit, I thought it was black on the sides, like pure white, but like the sides were black. It seemed like they're like dark navy blue, but you know, like I said, it could just be a lighting thing. I really liked the suit. Also, like, I didn't even know the bottoms, like, 'cause the bottoms kind of slightly remind me of the PS4 Spider-Man suit. Like how those kind of have like that sneaker-esque bottom to them. Maybe because I'm sure that varies from different costumes and continuities and who's ever designing them. But like some of Spidey's suits, and like, I mean, that particular version, but there's other versions where it's like the bottoms kind of look sneaker-esque. They have like a treading kind of similar to sneakers at the bottom. So it kind of reminded me of that. I think specifically like the multicoloring. I think it might have been a little reddish and blue. I do appreciate that Pete had ideas. He's like, oh, like I've been working on a suit myself, and it's the traditional Spidey suit, so he won't be getting that till probably the end of the season. The Future Foundation suit's probably what he's going to be rocking for the next couple episodes. But yeah, it's obviously all the more high tech stuff. It's supposed to be a little parallel to like the more high tech suit that Tony gave Peter. It's like a more more like it has all the trimmings and stuff like that. We don't know if it has a Karen like his does. At least in Homecoming, I don't think Karen ever came back in Far From Home or. I feel like I don't remember her. Definitely not in No Way Home, but it's been a while since I saw Far From Home since like it originally came out. So I don't think Karen was in that either. I want to say she's only in Homecoming, but like yeah, not unless we get something similar to that, because that's once again that's Tony's tech versus Oscorp tech. Because it's not just Norman working on it. He's got a whole bunch of scientists working on it. Obviously, them being none the wiser who Peter really is. But I guess they know they're working on Spider-Man stuff, or like, so they know their boss is tied to Spider-Man in some capacity, kind of, being his benefactor. But yeah, like the main thread ends up being these gangsters stealing some stuff. One of the people involved, his name is like Mikhail. The moment he started talking, I was like, is that fucking Travis Willingham? And it sure as hell is. I knew that sounded like Travis Willingham. Oh, that's so cool. Either way, which I didn't look this up, but like, that's Hammerhead, right? Like the moment I saw that character design in his forehead, I was like, that's gotta be Hammerhead before he's Hammerhead, right? I don't know. I love that whole thing of like, oh, you're this. He's like, no, I'm that. I'm the brains of the operations. No, I'm the muscle. He's like, oh, she's a wild card. No, I'm the wild. Mikhail, just shut up and drive. You're the guy with the van. And they're having this back and forth. And you have like Mila, who's like, yeah, I'll come back for you guys. And she immediately bails with everything that they stole. The moment they were talking about it, you're like, oh, they're definitely stealing it for the person behind all this tech, which ends up being Otto. We'll get to that in a second. But yeah, they all ended up getting busted. So I looked her up. The only person I could find was a character named Milos, who is, oh God, what was the name? Unicorn, I believe is like the alias name. So that's why I'm like, it must be a gender bend situation. Instead of Milos, it's Mila. Not unless that is a character, but like I put the name into Google and that was the first thing that came up was like, it's the same last name, but it's Milos instead of Mila. So it's a character I'm not familiar with. This show is pulling out all the deep cuts, unless you're like a mega like Spider-Man nerd, like or just a Marvel nerd. Like let's say I have above average Marvel knowledge, and most of my knowledge comes from like TV shows and movies and stuff like that I've watched over the years and stuff. So, in particular the MCU, but, stuff non-MCU as well. But you get the point I'm making. But either way, at the very end, it's revealed to be, oh, Otto is behind this. I thought so. I was like, because I remembered like, I think I specifically knew Otto was in this because I remember like early days of like when the show was back when it was still freshman year and they showed off concept art, and I think I remember them showing off Otto. So I knew he was in this, and I was like, well, it feels like it is him. Like I said, it's so interesting because just thinking of it Spectacular, because he was basically second fiddle. He was just basically like Osborn's like lackey, and in this it's like, oh, he's got his own operation, and him being as smart as he is tech-wise stuff, I figured like a trash can, all this tech these villains are getting, like it's got to be Otto. So I'm curious where he is in his story. It seems like he is full-blown Otto Octavius, like Doc Ock. So I just said his name. It's just like, no, he's full-blown Doc Ock. So I'm curious what's motivating him to do all this. Like, why did he go down the criminal route? And then finally, we also have the ending where Pete shows up. Because I thought it was interesting because Osborn kind of left them high and dry, being like, yo, like, I got something that came up, but then you didn't hear him for the rest of the episode. And then Peter shows up and takes off the mask and everything. And it's like, oh, and Harry now knows. So it was like, cool. Both of the Osborns, it's like, wow, that's fascinating for both of them to not only first and foremost, just to find out in general, but if both of them find out so quickly, because Harry doesn't really have a relationship with Peter. I mean, because that's usually the dynamic of, right, he has a relationship with Peter. They've been like best friends from childhood type of thing across most continuities. And then finding out later on that he's Spider-Man. But now it's like, ooh, now you know when we're friendly, but we're not friends. And now he knows your secret. And now that's going to be interesting too if they play it up like this, where it's like, Norman has such respect and he's putting so much time and effort into Peter. I'm curious if that's going to create like an inferiority complex in Harry, not feeling like he's good enough, where he feels like, oh, you'd rather have Peter as a son than me. It feels like I could definitely see their story being that issue, but it could also just be like Harry. I mean, because it could be like, yo, Peter kind of comes. It feels wrong to say from nothing, but comes from lesser money and stuff. Whereas like Harry's like, he's grown up with money, and so it is a situation of like he kind of seems like the rich spoiled kid versus the kid who's so hardworking and earnest. And I'm sure that could play into some stuff. I don't know if they'll go down that route, but I could definitely see that storytelling device kind of being the route they go. Because if once again, comparing and contrasting, because it's like I said, it's freshened up in my head. Even though I've only seen bits and pieces of it, I think I remember like, because I know Harry had an inferiority thing because of his dad, and maybe he typically does, but I did distinctly remember it in Spectacular Spider-Man because he wanted to prove himself to Gwen because he liked Gwen and also wanted to prove himself better than everyone else, prove himself worthy in his father's eyes. So I'm sure some of that could be translated over in this series if they decide to go down that route. But yeah, now Harry knows your secret. That's going to be really interesting. And to see how that all plays out. It's like, oh my God, you're Spider-Man. He's like, no, I'm not. It's like, why even bother lying, Peter, when he literally saw you swing in and take off the mask, dude? You're caught in 4K yet again. So we'll see how this all plays out going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.